At 78, Linda Ronstadt names the musician she can't forgive. She was the voice that could silence a stadium. The woman who bent genres like no one else in her era, moving from country to rock to opera to mariachi with a freedom that made critics reach for new words. But behind the brilliance, Linda Ronstadt carried wounds that most people never knew about. At 78, battling a rare neurological disease that has robbed her of her singing voice, and now, increasingly, of her ability to speak and hear, those old stories feel different. They carry more weight. And the people who crossed her, dismissed her, or failed to acknowledge what she gave them loom larger than ever in the rearview mirror of an extraordinary life. These are the musicians who left the deepest marks. The recording room Paul Simon turned into a power struggle. In 1982, the music world buzzed with the possibility of a collaboration between Ronstadt and Paul Simon. Two voices, two distinct artistic visions, an enormous amount of combined talent. What happened inside the studio was something else entirely. Simon ran the sessions as though she were there to execute his vision rather than contribute her own. Every suggestion she made was redirected or dismissed. He pushed her to adjust her natural phrasing to match his precise expectations. The session stretched long. The tension grew heavier. Ronstadt, who had built her entire career on the belief that collaboration required mutual respect, began to feel that she was not a partner in the room. She was a resource. The track was never finished. The duet was never released. For Ronstadt, walking away from the project was not a defeat. It was a decision she made with clarity about what she would and would not accept in a creative space. Simon's reputation for controlling perfectionism was already well established in the industry. What this episode confirmed for Ronstadt was something she had been learning for more than a decade: talent alone does not make someone worth working with. Dignity matters. Equality in the room matters. The night Jim Morrison used her as a prop. In 1968, Linda Ronstadt was still finding her footing. The Stone Ponies had given her a hit with Different Drum, and she was building a name as a solo artist. Jim Morrison was already burning. He was unpredictable, brilliant, and increasingly dangerous to be near. When he appeared at a concert where Ronstadt was performing, what happened was not a rock and roll moment. It was an ambush. Morrison walked out from backstage in the middle of her set and attempted to kiss her on stage without warning. Ronstadt pulled back, visibly shaken. Thousands of people watched. The incident was embarrassing, unwanted, and entirely his doing. It did not end there. Weeks later, in a radio interview, Morrison dismissed her publicly, calling her sweet but spineless and saying her music lacked fire. The insult spread across an industry where his word carried enormous weight. Ronstadt said nothing in return. She did not need to. She was building something he never could. Morrison was dead at 27 less than 3 years later. Ronstadt kept recording and touring for 4 more decades. His cruelty told the world more about him than it ever did about her. What Frank Zappa did in front of the whole band. Frank Zappa built his reputation on doing things no one else would do, and treating people as instruments in his personal machine rather than as peers. When Ronstadt entered his studio in 1974, already a platinum-selling artist, she was looking to push her boundaries. What she found instead was contempt. When she offered ideas, phrasing suggestions, vocal adjustments, Zappa laughed them off. Not quietly. In front of the band. A studio technician later recalled how uncomfortable it became as he mocked her grasp of complex arrangements. She walked out before the session was finished. No drama. No statement. Just silence. The tapes were shelved. Nothing from that session ever reached the public. What the incident revealed was not a gap in Ronstadt's talent. It revealed the cost of creative arrogance. Zappa later suggested privately that pop artists could not handle serious music. But what he called seriousness, others recognized as cruelty. Ronstadt went on to record mariachi albums, big band standards, and classical material. Her range was the answer to his dismissal, delivered on her own terms, years later, to massive acclaim. The Eagles and the Dead Don Henley never paid. Before the Eagles filled arenas and became one of the best-selling bands in history, they were two broke unknowns named Don Henley and Glenn Frey, trying to survive in Los Angeles. Linda Ronstadt changed everything for them. In 1971, she needed a backing band for her tour and brought in Henley on drums, Frey on guitar, along with Randy Meisner and Bernie Leadon. Glenn Frey had assembled the group at Ronstadt's request, and it was on the road together, sharing rooms and rehearsal spaces, that Henley and Frey began plotting a band of their own. "I was broke, and here was a chance for $200 a week," Henley later said. "We went out for a month or two, and Glenn and I struck up this great friendship. That's when we started plotting to put a band together." Ultimate classic rock. Ronstadt not only knew what was happening, she encouraged it. When Frey told her he and Henley were going to form a group, she said, "That's a great idea." She was not blindsided. She was generous. She even let them use the living room of the house she shared with J.D. Souther to rehearse. When she and Souther came home from the movies one evening, Henley and Frey had already worked up Witchy Woman in that room. Ultimate classic rock. Ultimate classic rock. The Eagles exploded quickly. Hotel California, Desperado, Take It Easy. The band Ronstadt built the foundation for became bigger than almost anyone. And yet, as their fame grew, so did a certain distance. Henley's tone toward Ronstadt's artistry shifted. He called her style safe. He questioned whether her sound had real fire. For a woman who had just handed him a career, the dismissal cut deep. Ronstadt never made a public scene about it, but those inside the industry knew she had drawn a firm line. The connection that created one of rock's greatest bands was allowed to quietly fade. The Eagles acknowledged her role at tribute shows, but in the daily mythology of how they built their legacy, the woman who brought them together was rarely centered in the story they told about themselves. The festival where Elvis Costello chose Cruelty. By 1979, Ronstadt had earned every right to headline any stage she chose. Elvis Costello, a rising figure in the punk and new wave movements, did not see it that way. After her set at a major festival, Costello dismissed her to reporters backstage, calling her performance background music for brunch. It was not a casual remark. It was a deliberate jab from someone positioning himself as a rebel against everything Ronstadt represented. She approached him backstage and confronted him directly. He doubled down and walked away. For Ronstadt, who had absorbed plenty of criticism over the years, this one was different. It came from a fellow artist at a shared event, and it was designed to diminish rather than critique. She said nothing publicly. Instead, she recorded an album of traditional Mexican music shortly after, a left turn that had nothing to do with punk credibility and everything to do with her own roots and vision. Critics praised it. New audiences found her. The brunch comment became a footnote. Her legacy did not. What David Crosby said to Rolling Stone. The Laurel Canyon scene of the early 70s was supposed to be built on mutual respect and creative freedom. Ronstadt was part of that world. So was David Crosby. They shared stages and sessions. And then, in 1975, a small disagreement during a benefit concert rehearsal cracked everything open. Ronstadt declined a key change Crosby suggested. She knew her voice. She protected her instrument carefully. Crosby did not accept it gracefully. Weeks later, in an interview with Rolling Stone, he called her manufactured. He said her success was a product of studio engineering, not real talent. Coming from someone with Crosby's stature, the remark was not just insulting. It was calculated to damage. Ronstadt was stunned, not only because of what he said, but because she had trusted him. She quietly removed herself from a planned studio session that would have included him, forcing producers to rework the project entirely. She never issued a public response. Within a few years, she had recorded traditional Mexican music to international praise and critical admiration, proving in the most elegant possible way that her voice needed no defense. Crosby later hinted at regret for the way he behaved during that period. By then, there was nothing left to repair. Neil Young and the rehearsal room he turned into a verdict. By the mid-70s, Ronstadt was at the absolute peak of her commercial power. Neil Young was also revered, moving through folk rock and political fury with a style that valued rawness above everything. When both appeared at a benefit concert for farm workers' rights in 1976, the paper version of the event looked like a perfect alliance of two powerhouses fighting for the same cause. The reality behind the scenes was different. Young made it plain that he believed Ronstadt's polished, radio-ready sound was wrong for a protest event. He did not say it quietly. He said she was too commercial, too clean. People in the room remembered how it landed. Ronstadt had come to support a cause she genuinely believed in, not to defend her artistic choices to a man who had no authority to evaluate them. She left the performance professionally and quietly stopped pursuing projects that would put her in Young's orbit. In later interviews, she hinted that male musicians had misjudged her sincerity more than once. She never named names. She did not have to. People who were there already knew. What remains? Today, Linda Ronstadt lives with progressive supranuclear palsy, a rare neurological disorder that forced her to retire from singing in 2009 and has since affected her balance, speech, and hearing. Reports in recent years confirmed that she has lost much of her ability to speak and hear. And yet her family has shared that she still finds joy in quiet moments, revisiting the Mexican folk music of her childhood, the songs that were there before the stadiums, before the Grammys, before any of the men who underestimated her. Restore mental health memory melodies. At 78, she cannot sing. But the music she made still answers every person who ever told her she did not belong.